Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of the Emerald Planet and EmeraldPlanet TV. We come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technology, services, and products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we have a planet of 9 billion people by 2038 and possibly 12 to 13 billion by the end of this century, how are we going to be able to take care of all these people on planet Earth? And that's what Emerald Planet's all about. We come to you looking at the solutions, the best practices from around the globe as we create the Emerald Planet. Hello, welcome to the Emerald Planet. We're making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And seeing the long-term impacts of climate change. We're glad to have you. Thank you for being with us. Hello, and again, thank you for being with Emerald Planet and Jobenomics America TV. We're coming to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we're looking across 8,700 opportunity zones, looking for the best practices that can be used there as we create new green businesses and new green jobs. And I have a gentleman who is the captain and the chief of all this. This is Charles D. He goes by Chuck Vollmer, founder, president, author of Jobenomics. And welcome to Jobenomics America TV.
Well, thank you, Sam.
Glad to have you here. And welcome to the Emerald Planet as well, because that's where we're talking about right now. But anyway, looking at all of this, tell us a little bit about the vision and the mission as far as Jobenomics.
Yeah, Jobenomics is a national grassroots movement. It's about 10 years old now. We've reached about 30 million people, and we focus on economic, community, small business, and workforce development in underserved communities.
Yeah, and really that's very important, and looking at the various aspects of that. You have many publications, and so tell us a little bit about those and also some of the genesis of these publications.
Yeah, I started at about 2009. I have a security background, and so I was on one of the presidential campaign teams, and they brought me as a senior security advisor. So I started talking to them about economic security, and I said, what's that? You know, we're talking about national security, homeland security. I said, well, I know about that too, but if you don't have economic security, then you can't afford the rest. And so that didn't go real big with them. So I went to Wall Street, and they asked me to write a book about this. Mm-hmm. And so it started off, it came out Jobenomics, and then I went back to Congress, and I had a lobbyist friend of mine that took me about 30 times. I got nowhere. I got nowhere with the left or the right because didn't really have an interest in a small business approach to workforce development. And I guess they had their own plans, and you know they're more oriented to big business with PACs. Correct. And stuff like that, which small business does. So I started working with the governors and then the mayors, and then about 2016, the local community leaders started coming to me and said, hey, look, we went to your website, jobenomics.com, and into your library, and you've got 11 books that you've written, and you got about 100 special reports, and it's drinking out of a fire hose. And so can you tailor this to our community? And so that started down the road of tailoring specific programs for whether it's a neighborhood, or whether it's a small city, whether it's the metropolitan area, or even a county. Well,
let's go look at some of these Jobenomics chapters. Tell us a little bit about those. Some of these are real legacy cities, others are quite rural areas. Even now you're talking with Native Americans for one of the sovereign nations. So tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, well, it started off in New York City. The guy who was running for mayor, and he said, look, I want to run on Jobenomics. So we did a New York City, and then we did a Harlem, and then we did Baltimore, we did Chicago, Atlanta, and so as the map shows, we've got about 25 or 30 of these things out there. And they're all different stages of development. When you go into impoverished areas in the inner city, the rural area, part of the reason that they're impoverished is they really don't understand the language of business. And it kind of goes hand in hand. Jobs don't create jobs, businesses do. So we go in, and the community leaders, we put together a coalition, and I say, look, I need probably about 30 or 40 community leaders to put this together, and we have access to financing through the opportunity zones. And so, so it's in different stages of maturations. We still haven't really got a marquee program, but it takes about 5 years to get these things going.
Yeah, it's just like any small business. It's whether it's an insurance, real estate, accounting, whatever it is. It's about 5 years to really get it established and people understand that you're out there and what you're trying to do. So looking at these major areas, you have these focuses that you're really looking at, you think can fit into these different communities. You can mix and match these, which is really very important for those local communities. So tell us a little bit about some of these.
You mean the programs?
Right.
Yeah, when we put together this economic community workforce development approach, and it's a different approach. And when you go in the inner cities, they kind of look at skeptical, but when you're in a impoverished area, they don't believe, that the current system's working for them. I don't care if they're Republican or Democrat, and so, or whatever, we're a nonpartisan movement. So they're getting really interested about saying, how do we mass produce micro businesses in use that are locally owned? And so they buy it. They say, well, what programs are you talking about? And so we've come up with about a dozen programs. And I think you have a slide on it that says, we'll talk about just briefly about each of those. The one we have highlighted in red is, we're going to talk a little bit, is controlled environment agriculture. That's indoor agriculture. Indoor agriculture, it can be hydroponics, it could be a different, it could be more traditional, soil-based types of things. But indoor agriculture produces 9 times the volume than outdoor does, and it uses only 1% of the water. And so in stressed areas, water-stressed areas, we do that. So we can break it down into a quarter-acre lot in a micro greenhouse, or we can make a 100,000 square foot facility.
So it's expandable, and you just mix and match as far as what you need in there.
And as we've talked about before at EmeraldPlanet is, for example, if I take a condominium complex, I could put it on the roof. Or if I take a retirement community for the older people that don't have a lot to do, I could put a large greenhouse micro farm outside. And what we grow indoors is organic. That means herbicide, pesticide, and non-GMO. And consequently, it really is in high demand now.
And I understand you're using organic root stimulants, so you're not using chemical fertilizers either.
Yeah, that goes to the enhanced water program, and we're going to talk, in the whole show about the thing called SuperWater HyOx. It is, and it was rated by Dr. Linares, is going to talk to you in the next couple of 3 segments about exactly how he came.
Talk about urban mining and some of these others.
Sure. Let me just before on that, the SuperWater is great to use that because organic usually produces about half as much volume. You add the SuperWater, it makes the same amount of volume as the non-organic, and it does it cheaper. So this whole farm-to-table craze is really a big deal.
Particularly in urban areas.
Yeah, and now we move on to urban mining. Urban mining says, a lot of the mayors and the community leaders said, we don't have any money. It's all spoken for. I said, well, how about if I create $50 million for you? And they said, well, how do you do that? I said, what you call trash, we call commodities. So we have a MSW, which is the typical garbage,
waste.
And to energy, we have a plastics to waste, and we have an e-cycling and electronics to waste program. The ones that are most interested is plastics to waste. We're associated with several companies that have turnkey systems that are operational. That you can take everything from soda straws to the PET bottles. This is a PET bottle, or acrylics, PVC pipes, and the rest. You throw it into in the pyrolysis chamber, and it comes out as sulfur-free diesel fuel. So, like in California or in New York, the more liberal states that are banning soda straws and throwaway plastic bags, one-use plastic bags. We say that's all well and good, but if we just collect it and we give it to you, we can turn that into a values program. So it's plastic to values. Same thing with end-of-life electronics. You could throw a refrigerator on a conveyor belt, and it goes through a shredder, and it sorts, and then you end up with copper, aluminum, iron, and plastic, so you can sell or you can build businesses out of. The other programs that we have, digital economy is a big one. The digital economy is growing about 5 times faster, actually more than that, at 15% a year, where our traditional GDP is 2%.
And that goes across all age ranges too. People keep saying it's only for the screenagers and the young people.
Yeah.
Actually, people 60 and older are actually adopting this
Yeah.
and have life skills. They have real work experience, and so they can take, they can leverage all of that as far as this digital economy.
Yeah, digital economy, it's got e-commerce, it's got m-commerce, telehealth, the apps economy, the bots economy.
And they can do it from their own space.
Yeah, they can do
that.
Go
anywhere.
And for example, in Anacostia, which is the poorest section of Washington and is highly African American, we have a certification program, even in the cybersecurity. And cybersecurity is really high tech.
Right.
For a kid that's just graduating from high school, we can get him certified within about 4 or 5 months, and he can get an entry-level salary for $60,000 in cybersecurity. Because of the amount of jobs that are open, about a third of them are for entry-level in maintenance, support, and human relations. But they have to be certified that they understand the language of that. We have entrepreneur clubs, and we have energy services, and we got experimental tourism. Those are some of the things that we can put in these communities to mass produce microbusiness.
Opportunity zones. What are they? Why are they important?
Okay, opportunity zones, 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act had provision put by 2 African American senators, Tim Scott, South Carolina, and Cory Booker of New Jersey, said, hey, look, we need to do something for the poor people, and then they say the underserved and under-resourced. So they said to the governors, pick the lowest 25% of the poor census tracts. And then the Treasury Department certified the half of that, so 12.5%, the bottom 10%. And there's 8,700 of these census tracts. Now, since I'm already working, my chapters are already in these under-resourced, where almost all of them are in that. And in the Opportunity Zone is different than the other government programs like Empowerment Zone, Hub Zones, and the like, because it's a private sector.
Yeah, and that's really, really critical. Looking at some of this ways of this, what you call the opportunity zones or the O areas, where you can actually bring in this shopping mall concept. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the Opportunity Zones funds that they have, there's 200, and they've got a total of $45 billion with a B.
With a B.
With a B. And so now the poor people in the inner city say, hey, when they go and say, oh, I got this money that's coming in to build businesses, and they say, how much do you want? Well, I want 50,000, 100,000. Well, in an Opportunity Zone with all that money, and they're like hedge funds or REITs or venture funds, they're looking for 20 to $50 million projects. So what we do is we take these anchor tenant programs that we call, like the urban mining, the urban agriculture, or the SuperWater, HyOx, and we say those are like your J.C. Penney and your Sears in a mall. Now, in a mall, this is a physical mall, we're doing more of a virtual distributed. They do about a quarter of the jobs, but in a mall, most of the jobs are the micro businesses that are between these 2 anchor tenants in a mall. These are the clothing shops and the restaurants and the entertainment and the
like the movies, and skating, and all these.
All
things.
This stuff. It's all those little micro businesses are what actually produce the most jobs. So, if we're looking for a $20 million project, I have 2 anchor tenants, or say $50 million. $20 million for the urban mining, for say the plastic to waste program. And say 20 million for the indoor, 100,000 foot indoor agriculture. There's 40, and I can add probably another 10 million because I'm making the return on investment on these. And at the end of the day, I can fund all those micro businesses. The guy that wants 50,000 or 100,000, I can kind of bundle it all when they're, because the Opportunity Zone funds have to have social impact.
And the whole thing about this too is you're drawing people from the local community that you're identifying that really need this.
Right.
And this goes back really to the training program that you have. Let's go back to these, where actually you're bringing people in, allowing them to be trained, skilled, and then they can go out into their own business.
Yeah.
So this way you're matching the skills that you're identifying within the community, or those that want to have these skills, with the money that's coming through the enterprise zones.
Yeah, and the Opportunity Zones.
Yeah,
the
Opportunity Zones.
Yeah, so anyway, you go into the community and you say, this is the concept, here's the intellectual capital, here are the turnkey programs that I've got. And they say, well, wait a minute, I got a program. I said, well, great, we'll add it to the list. Okay, and so we mix and match. We figure Okay, if they don't want a plastics to waste, they want more of a clean tech type of thing. We do more of the energy and the agriculture. But then we add their programs in there, and it really, now all of a sudden when I have a stakeholders meeting, this first stakeholder meeting gets about 25, and in Erie, Pennsylvania, I was getting almost 1,000 people coming to these things.
That's amazing, absolutely amazing.
And,
it shows the interest.
Yeah, it shows the interest. So now what we need to do is actually get these programs funded and up and running. And for the agriculture thing, we already have 3 Opportunity Zone funds that say they'll put $150 million into our programs.
That's incredible. Going to the chapters across this area as far as the stressed areas, as far as the water is concerned?
Yeah, again, the indoor agriculture and the SuperWater HyOx is important from the fact is if I can grow at one, cheaper, better quality, same amount of growth, and use 1/10 or 1% of the water. All these stressed areas, and that's what the map was, a water stressed area, especially in the West. Now we're talking, we have one project in California that we've already architected out. It is going to be 2.6 million square feet under roof.
That is absolutely incredible.
On a 1,000-acre facility. So we do indoor and outdoor and build a community around it.
Looking at food deserts, what's the food, we got to be quick because we're down to the last minute.
This goes with this, is that the country has got malnutrition problems, and the food desert means you're 1 mile away from a grocery store where you can buy good food in an urban area and 10 miles in a rural. And so the reason that people are malnutrition is not that they're starving, they generally are obese because they're eating Twinkies and pizzas from the local convenience, big
empty calories.
Empty calories. So we're providing, and this is what Dr. Ray is going to talk to you about, is water is life and nutrition is life, and that we're moving from an environment, we've gone from bottled water, which everybody thought was crazy 20 years ago, to clean water. Now we're talking about super oxygenated water, which is really healthy water that you can use for people and plants and even toxic waste dumps too.
We're going to have that new adage, water plus oxygen is life. We're down to the last 15 seconds. So thank you. This is Chuck Vollmer, founder, president, author of Jobenomics. Thank you for being with us as we come to you on a week-to-week basis and monthly basis for Jobenomics America TV as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet. On EmeraldPlanet TV, as you know, on a week-to-week basis, we're always looking for those best practices, many of them that have not actually been known much outside of their own communities. We have one that we're going to be demonstrating now that's actually becoming well-known in the country of Colombia and within the United States itself as it looks to expand around the globe. This is called the HyOx, or HyOxygenated water, and it's called SuperWater. And we're going to find out what SuperWater is all about. This is Dr. Reinerio Linares. He is the lead scientist, founder, CEO, as far as HyOx SuperWater, and we're glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
Thank you for traveling so far to be with us in
Anytime.
Washington, D.C. Glad to have you. Looking at what is the meaning of HyOxygenated water and the SuperWater. Why do you have these two together, and what is the meaning?
So there is a small amount of oxygen dissolved in water. This has been depleted over the years since agriculture, pesticides, and toxic waste has been dumped in the water. So we have increased the amount of oxygen dissolved in the water to a higher level, 100%, 200% of what is normally sustained in the water. So this is important for life.
Now this is something that you hit upon as an idea when you're looking at the core samples coming from the Arctic and Antarctic, and how there was higher levels of oxygen in the water going back, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years. So then you wanted to bring this forward into the 21st century. Is that what you're all about?
It's correct. And if you see the type of vegetation and animals that grew a long time ago, they were lush vegetables, huge trees, very well healthy animals. So I think a lot had to do with the type of water they were drinking at that time.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the new adage now is not only is water is life, but water plus oxygen is life, correct?
A super life.
Yes, and we're going to be talking about that. But looking at these dead zones, like in the Gulf of Mexico, and there's dead zones in the Pacific, the Atlantic oceans, all over the world, there's these dead zones. Even the Chesapeake Bay, right here in Virginia has dead zones. So looking at that, what is a dead zone, and why is the oxygen in these areas so critically important?
So the Worldwide Consortium of Scientists for the Study of Water, March of 2019 in Scientific American, published a beautiful study, and what they showed that a decline of oxygen by 3% dissolved in the water makes the phytoplankton move to another areas where the oxygen is normal. So lower than 3% is critical and is put a stress on any type of life. Dead zones in the Mediterranean, in the China Sea, and the Indian Ocean, in the Gulf of Mexico. These are areas in which the dissolved oxygen in the water is as low as 50% from normal. So these are unable to sustain life, dead zones.
Now the plankton is so critical and important as far as the sea life, but actually all of life on planet Earth. Tell us, what is plankton and why is it so important that it be protected?
So the unicellular or a few microns or millimetric type of bacteria, algae, and the small vertebrates, tiny stream, those are called phytoplankton. So this is the base of the food chain for all the rest of the animals, small size, medium size, large size. So if the phytoplankton is not there, then the food chain is going to go down the drains.
Now, looking at this bright, brilliant green in this waterway, we think, oh wow, this is really healthy, this is really great. Actually, it's just the opposite of that, correct?
Correct. This is an overgrowth of green algae or red tide algae sometimes that is depleting the ocean of oxygen. And this algae is being overgrown due to an amount of fertilizers that are dumped in the water. So they're feeding the algae is consuming the oxygen. The depletion of oxygen ends up killing the life that was there in those parts.
Mm-hmm. Now looking at red tide, actually what is red tide?
So red tide is a type of algae and it produces toxic substance that can impair the metabolic processes of many organisms in the water, especially fish. And when this algae overgrows, it's always a small amount of that algae, but when it overgrows, then it becomes a problem because the toxins are higher and the oxygen consumption is also higher, and depleting the oxygen with higher toxins makes it impossible for other forms of life to survive. So we have, last year in Florida, a huge amount of fish dead all over the state of Florida due to the red tide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking at that too, is people don't realize that when they're putting chemical fertilizers on their lawn, goes onto the golf courses, onto the farms, wherever it is, and then also insecticides, pesticides, all this is really ending up in the water because the application is too high and not properly made, and at the same time it's running out through the storm water. So how can people actually stop red tide right in their own yard, at their own golf course, at their own farm?
So I think the organic growth, using type of organic nutrients, organic fertilizers, decreasing the amount of chemical fertilizers that are going to run off to the ocean and create this problem is the way to go. And also we have to be mindful of the amount they use, and if we really need these luscious lawns and greens and the golf courses all the time. Probably not. So I think there has been also an overuse of these chemicals by our society nowadays.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're going to be talking about later is the more of these chemicals you use, actually more sterile and more dead the soil itself becomes, and it kills off a lot of the microbes that are actually key to life as well. Dead coral. What is a dead coral?
So dead coral has been a consequence, again, of this excessive dumping of chemicals there. We, during the process of evolution, different plants, different corals were never exposed to, and all of a sudden we are dumping tons of chemicals to the ocean, They become toxic to the corals. Many of these toxins are impairing and blocking normal ways of the metabolic path in the coral. The depleted oxygen in the coral also is causing anoxia, which is the lack of the process. And then the coral is dying for these reasons.
Yeah. So anyway, here comes the cavalry to save humankind from itself. You're from Cali, Colombia.
Correct.
And then, of course, now you have an operation in Florida as you've introduced this HyOx SuperWater into the United States. But why coming out of Cali, Colombia? What's happened there that has led to this discovery and now the manufacture of this HyOx water?
So it's a little convoluted, but I'm a internal medicine doctor. I train in New York, a lung specialist. Then I settled in Tampa, Florida, but my roots are in Cali. I have a group of friends who are committed and dedicated to improve the environment there. So they try to develop a technology to improve fuel, to decrease contamination. And along the way, I saw that their technology could be used for enhancing the oxygen in the water. Being that I'm an oxygen specialist to treat humans, I thought that it could be used also to enhance oxygen, to treat vegetation, to treat animals, and to improve the water. When there's no oxygen in the water, that's when the water smells bad due to the anaerobic bacteria that cause this putrid, offensive smell when it's intoxicating the water this way.
Yeah, I wanted to interject this too. When I was up in the Mojave Desert, this is a real desert area. There's virtually little life of any kind there. And we're looking at green mining process. And this gentleman was finding the gold, moving it, but he was doing a green process, so no chemicals are being used. He was only doing a solution with water. He was recycling 95% of the water because there was one well in 100 miles or so of this area. But when he would put back the soil, which he was doing within 24 hours, it was still 5% of the water in there, but also oxygen was going into the soil. And so you could see the areas where he'd done the mining, and actually the critters, the scorpions, the tortoises, the snakes, and all that were moving into this area, as well as looking for not only the moisture, but also for the oxygen, because this soil, and so the plants started growing on their own, in a matter of months in areas that had nothing. So when you talk about this, I can understand exactly what you're saying, because this really applies to everything. So
Correct.
This water plus oxygen really does equal life. Going into your R&D facility down in Cali, tell us about that and how this evolved.
So the R&D facility has been processed in Colombia due to the cost of doing research here in the U.S. So we have a lab where we do all the electronics, the hydraulics, and the field testing in waterways, sewage treatment plants, lakes.
So this has been extensive research then, going across many different disciplines.
Correct. We've been in a process for about 4 to 5 years doing this research and testing. We had done testing with sugar cane, cocoa, coffee, fisheries. So it has been, once you know how extensive the water is used in different industrial applications,
right,
then you realize that you can tackle all those fields and improve the process and decrease the cost.
Well, it's amazing. Here you have your R&D down in Cali, then you're in this very large processing plant, and still call it manufacturing processing plant in Florida. So looking at entry into the United States, why come to the United States with this?
So like Frank Sinatra said, if you make it here, you can make it everywhere.
Okay.
So this is the industrial capital of the world, the scientific house light for the world. So if we, even though discovered the technology in Colombia, process it there, we have to prove it here. We have brought it here. We're starting the process of application here in the U.S. because I think it would be a way to spread to the rest of the world, which is what we pretend and try to do. And that's why we're here in EmeraldPlanet, because we want to spread this knowledge throughout the world.
Yeah, it's interesting in your R&D facility, you're really looking for how to use hydrogen as fuel for the vehicles, and we have one of those there. But what you found is that the water actually became more valuable than using hydrogen as a fuel, correct?
Correct. So if we put in order of values, we can live without the vehicles, but we can live without the plants, the animals, and the water. So from that point of view, the sidekick, it became the water, but now is the main focus of all the research and testing.
Tell us, where do you see this HyOx super oxygenated water going over the next 5, 10, or 15 years? We got to be quick.
So over the next 5 or 10 years, we're looking for strategic alliances with other entities, agencies such as Jobenomics here in the U.S. That will help us in the promotion, distribution, and also in the research of these applications for the high oxygenated water.
This is Dr. Linares. Thank you for being with us. And thank you for being with us as you learn about the SuperWater high oxygenated as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet. As you know, we're in Washington, D.C., and we're always looking for the best of the best, those solutions that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we've always talked about on EmeraldPlanet TV, we talk about water is life, and now we're adding water plus oxygen is life. Of course, water is H2O, but over the many decades and now maybe centuries, the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water has been steadily decreasing. And a gentleman sitting right beside me is a research scientist as well as a physician and has a number of disciplines in his background. And he looked at water and said, how can we turn that into superwater, correct?
Correct.
And so this is Dr. Linares, goes by Ray. He's the lead scientist, founder, and CEO of HyOx SuperWater. And thank you for being here.
Thank you for hiring me, Sam.
And looking at this SuperWater, but what is dissolved oxygen? This is something we really didn't define the first time. Let's talk about dissolved oxygen and how does it actually get into the water?
So the molecules of water, H2O, they coalesce and sometimes they create this, I would call it a small basket. And inside those baskets, there are molecules of pure oxygen that are suspended in there. And there's always an interaction, kind of like moving from one molecule to the other. So this single oxygen is what the animals that live in the ocean use when they breathe. So the amount of oxygen that is dissolved in the water is critical for sustaining life.
Yeah, and looking at your facility in Florida, this is actually where you're producing this. And it's amazing to think about you're actually producing higher oxygen water because as human beings, we never really think about it.
Correct.
You know, water has oxygen, so we drink it. The oxygen's in the air, so we breathe it. But we never really think about where it comes from and the essence of water is this, the water itself plus the oxygen is critical to all of our life, but also an enhanced life. So why, again, add this oxygen into it, and you really are healing animals, you're healing the plants, and you're healing human beings at the same time.
Correct. So going back thousands of years, the water has more oxygen than we have today. The oxygen has a more pure quality in the air that we are breathing thousands of years to what we're now. Mm-hmm. So there has been a decline due to the industrial pollution, contamination, and that has caused the animals, the plants in general have been suffering for this lack of pure elements that we're exposed, and we evolved with them. Mm-hmm. So we evolved with good materials, now we are having bad materials because 60% of our body is water. 80 to 90% of the plants are water. Mm-hmm. So if we have a bad water, we're going to have bad humans, we're going to have bad plants, we're going to have bad animals, or more susceptible to conditions such as chronic illness, etc., that are plaguing our society nowadays.
What is code zero fragmentation? What does that really mean? And I have an image here of the schematic about how you're actually supercharging this water with more oxygen. What does this really mean?
So what many scientists all over the world have known that this is a problem. So trying to solve is how do we inject the oxygen back into the water. So has been many different methodologies have been tried, infusion high pressure oxygen, electrolysis, etc. So we developed
and actually just merely stirring the water, using blowers and using
like you use in a fish
paddles
tank.
and all these things. Yeah.
Correct. So we developed this technology called zero fragmentation. It's an electromagnetic way to retweak the molecules of water, the hydrogen, the oxygens, and make it, I would say, similar to what they were thousands of years ago, in which the water is able to release oxygen, but is able to contain that oxygen within it for a longer period of time, because that's what we really need. How can we sustain that oxygen in the water for longer periods so it can be used for plants, animals, and the environment without any time limitation?
Now, you went through all this registration process, the FDA, the EPA, and you had third-party evaluators to actually test your water over a period of time to see how long you could interject this, in essence, suspended oxygen into it, and then how long would it last. So tell us a little bit about that process and why having these approvals are so important.
So any food that is directed for human consumption here in the U.S. and most of all over the world, the government entities like here in the U.S., the FDA, are in charge to design protocols, supervise good manufacturing practices, so the product that is going to end up at the line for the consumer is the best quality and reproducible in the same way all the time. So the plant where we produce the water here in the U.S. Has won some accolades for water production. They are FDA certified, and the EPA certifies the laboratory that tests the waters. So every water bottling plant has to have these certifications. So we obtain the certifications through the independent third-party labs that have tested our water, certified the levels of oxygen, the quality of the water, and how it's being produced according to these protocols to be consumed by humans.
And also you tested about the longevity of that. So you don't just interject this or produce water that has it, and then after 30 days or whatever, that oxygen's gone. You had to prove through this testing that this is going to be suspended oxygen for months and months at a time, correct?
Correct. So this is not like what happens to the carbonated sodas that you open and the gas fizzles out and then you have flat soda. So here, because of the electromagnetic technology that we developed, the oxygen remains trapped, suspended in the water for periods up to years or so forth. So now we have tested up to 10 months, and the levels continue to be pretty well above 200% of the normal amount that is dissolved in the regular water.
Yeah, and actually I understand you can actually boost that much higher than that. But looking at these small units as far as what people actually can have in their home or carry with them on their trips, or even if they're traveling abroad, how does this really help?
So this is going to help because once you test the water, you use it, you'll like it, and you're going to feel the difference. So these are devices, portable devices that you can carry anywhere of the world. You go camping in Alaska or Montana, in the Himalayas, and you're going to take the water, and you can introduce one of these devices and hyperoxygenate your water. That is going to improve, and you're going to get all the metabolic benefits of increased hydration with hyperoxygenated water.
Yeah, it's amazing that the simple little device that we're looking at can do all that.
Correct, and that's what we call code zero technology, because the amount of energy needed for these small devices and even for the larger devices are so small that the carbon footprint in these devices is almost zero.
That-
So we're not using excessive energy to produce this. Can
Now-
use solar panels for that.
Yeah. Now looking at putting this into, as you have here, the field system, but anyway, for agricultural purposes. So you're taking it, so you have these units that you actually can produce enough water for a person, for themselves to drink around their home or where they're camping or traveling wherever they want to go. But also you can do this in large scale agriculture, correct?
Correct. So and here we use is a tank that many farmers have to as a reservoir for their irrigation. So we can put one of our devices there and oxygenate the water in very little time, and they can have that oxygenated water for long periods of time. I just mentioned 10 months, a year, and they can irrigate. Now the beauty of this is that we have proven and realized that you need only like 20 or 30% of that water compared to what you used to have before. So we are saving the farmers, and especially now in this water crisis all over the world, reducing up to 70 to 80% of the water needed to irrigate for the plants to grow, and they grow better with these lower amounts of hyperoxygenated water.
And also too is actually you can put in the organic root stimulant, whatever type of variety that people want to use, so this could actually be applied as a spray, as a liquid, instead of using the old style as far as the granulated fertilizers, correct?
Correct, yes, and we have developed also an organic product that it will help this with probiotics, natural enzymes, natural vegetable extracts, and we call it HyOx.
But also too, I think with the water and this probiotics, this mixture that you have in this HyOx, is actually you're feeding the enzymes, these micro creatures in the soil, so you're actually enhancing their lives. At the same time, you're enhancing the growth of the root system of each of the plants.
Correct. So I compare this what I spoke about the phytoplankton in the ocean. We have a similar phytoplankton in the soil, and actually these microfungi, microbacteria are helping the root, the plant, to get the nutrients needed to provide adequate nutrition to the xylem and phloem, which is the circulatory system of the plant.
Now we have this photograph here. We have a couple of photographs showing the improvement of the soil. So you're addressing the soil as well as the root system of the plants.
Correct. As you mentioned before, the excessive use of fertilizer, chemicals, especially from hydrocarbons produced, excessive nitrogens, potassium, etc., are going to solidify or damage the soil. So these probiotics and these bacteria, this water make the soil, phytoplankton of the soil, to return back to life and are able to transform the soil itself. So the difference that you saw there was achieved just with the water and a small amount of that symbiotic HyOx.
Looking at this as far as this remote control on the irrigation system, so you're actually cut down on the amount of water it's needed. You're increasing the plant life as well as the microbes in the soil. So actually you're improving the soil in many areas across the United States now, as well as in Colombia and many other countries in the future.
Correct. So right now we are trying to do some projects in Jamaica, Spain, with the coffee growers in Jamaica, with some of the zucchini growers in Spain. They call it calabacin, and all they have proven that the soil is brought back to life. So from a deteriorated soil, there has been a soil that is now fertile with rich nutrients and able to sustain and preserve life longer, especially the plants.
That's fantastic. That's Dr. Linares, the lead scientist, founder, CEO of HyOx SuperWater, and also the Terra HyOx, right?
Correct.
And thank you for being with us in EmeraldPlanet as we look around the globe to find those improvements as we create the Emerald Planet. Yes, and thank you again for being with us as we're looking at this amazing product This is called the HyOx SuperWater. And it's all about, we're really changing the paradigm of how we look at water itself. We've always talked about water as life, and this is a branded name as far as the DC Water in Washington, DC is. But also now we're adding as water plus oxygen, increased oxygen, is life. And the gentleman who actually is the inventor of the technologies to do all this and discovered it by looking at millions of years old oxygenated water, correct? In the core samples of the Arctic and the Antarctic, is Dr. Reinerio Linares. He is the lead scientist, founder, and CEO of HyOx SuperWater in Florida and also in Cali, Colombia.
Correct.
And we're glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
And looking at this, the water, as far as new green societies, this is something that's really key, is that we want to have higher employment, people living in urban areas and small rural areas have a living wage there. They don't have to be moving other places, but improve their own local communities. But you're saying your HyOx SuperWater, as well as this Terra HyOx, actually can help do all that within local communities. How do you do that, and why focus on the communities, not just the individuals in the communities?
Correct. So I think like as we humans are a sociable entity, and we try to be communal, and most people in their communities are really looking for each other, small communities. So if given the right tools, most people will do the right thing. And now are more and more conscious that we need to save our environment, our planet, our water, our food. So this movement is expanding rapidly. And if we go back to the community, which is the backbone of our society, given the right tools and at an affordable price, they will do the right thing.
Now we're looking at, you're talking about this high oxygen SuperWater and the whole thing of improving agriculture, but also the quality of the soil, of the air, not just the water itself. So you have this set up so you can actually do this indoors as well as out of doors. So tell us about the discovery and what your research has led you to, and how this is actually now being introduced into not just small holdings, the spin that we've talked about, the small plot intensive organic farming, but also in large scale farming as well.
So in small farms in the inner cities and in small communities, small rural communities, they can do these farms because the amount of water that they need to use, especially now in this water crisis that is being expanded worldwide due to the contamination. So we can use smaller amounts of water. This hyperoxygenated water will be able to sustain these small plots without using large volumes. The Terra HyOx will be a nutrient that will be added to it in its tiny amounts, and it's all organic. But this can be also done in large irrigation systems or in large agricultural areas. So the advantage is that people won't need to use any chemical fertilizers. So there will be the savings will be there, the land will recover, and people can produce fresh, organic, affordable food for their communities. And they can also make industries out of this, and they will sustain and improve the social status.
Yeah, and looking at this too, we're looking at these very large containers. So you can make this in your factory, ship it to site. You know, if someone wants to use this as far as, you know, their small plot areas within the city or in rural areas. But also you manufacture the equipment so they can actually use these same containers and produce, you know, this high oxygenated water on their own using their own water from their local areas.
Correct. So we try to make it as affordable as possible, and it could be in technology that is pliable, that could be applied in the Amazon jungle, that could be applied in the Midwest, could be in the center of Africa, of India, because it can be taken, it's portable, it doesn't need electrical grid, it could be operated with solar panels, so either people can get the containers, prepare their own water. Could be running water, creek water, rain water. Any water can be made better by these systems.
Yeah, that's just amazing. And we're going to show some of the examples here as far as what you've been able to produce. But you know, one of the things about this, what your research has shown, is not only are you increasing the size of the fruit, but actually the nutritional value of the fruit. How does the high oxygenated water do that?
So the way we develop the technology and the way we have done the research is that we think that given the right nutrition, the right hydration to the plant is able to express its utmost inner genetics. So, for instance, one of the problems that we have worldwide with the tomatoes is that we have made the tomatoes last longer, but they're tasteless. Okay? Same with the apple, same with many, many other vegetables that we consume. We have made them last longer, but they're tasteless. They are not what they used to be.
And they're not as nutritious
They're
either.
not as nutritious. So what we are trying is to revert back the genetics of the plant to its own inner expression. So an avocado is going to take like a good avocado, tomato is going to taste like a good tomato, and it's going to be a healthy produce.
I like the psychology that you're applying to your plant, this inner expression of what is a tomato, what is a pumpkin, what is an avocado, what is a ear of corn. So what you're doing is that you're allowing it to go back because you're taking this SuperWater, in essence, giving it more oxygen and also other nutrients as far as the Terra HyOx, and then allowing the genetics of the plant, just like we have genetics in human beings, you know, the antibodies. So it not only protects it, but it increases, you know, its, as you say, your expression, but actually the growth of the plant, the fruit itself.
Yes, correct. So I have thought of this the other day. I think if we have become humans or scientists, sometimes we have become so arrogant that we think that we know how to make nature better. Well, nature has been experimented for millions of years.
Yeah.
And what God has put here, or evolution has made here, I think is already pretty damn good, you know, to sustain life up to this point. And what we just let it happen, you know, we don't need to modify, we don't need GMOs, all this, because nature has encountered this balance for millions of years. We have disturbed this balance. And part of this balance is what the millions of years, thousands of years before, the water was excellent water, highly oxygenated water. The air was pure, and this was enough for the plant to produce these beautiful fruits, these very tasty fruits, leaves, legumes, etc. That we're trying to improve now, but we're failing. They're tasteless. We're destroying the land. We're destroying the soil. So I think we have to go back to the ancient traditions to let nature alone, because nature knows best.
So we were continued to improve after World War II because of starvation across the globe due to the devastation of, you know, World War II and all these local conflicts. We had to improve, but now we have, in essence, the comfort. We have this margin as far as nutrition is concerned that we can now go back and recapture a lot of that. So what we're doing is not only recapturing the inner expression of the fruits and vegetables that you talk, and I love that. That's very poetic. And but at the same time, as human beings, we're going back and rediscover the freshness, how tasteful, you know, the fruits and vegetables are, and really enjoying the nutrition of each of these things we're eating, not just the mass of it, which has made most people obese.
Correct.
But we're getting the essence of this.
Exactly.
You're a poet. I like this. This is wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Looking at the panela, the sugar cane, tell us a little about this. And we're looking at before the treatment, after the treatment, and there is a dramatic difference that you can actually see in these photographs.
Yes, and you know, so one of the problems that the organic or the farmers that wants to grow organic has is that once they do an organic farming, the yields compared to intensive fertilization, intensive use of pesticides, their yields were lower. But we think that these yields are lower because the soil has been destroyed, has been tampered with, because the water is not
By all the chemicals that have been applied to it.
Prior
Okay.
to it. So they have a lower yield. So the only way to stay in business is to make that produce, those fruits, cost more. So what we had done, and thanks God, thanks to our technologies, we've been able to produce almost or equal amounts of yield with organic growth versus intensive pesticides growth, with the addition of the higher oxygenated water and the Terra HyOx. So now the cost is less and the yield is the same. So there will be the capacity to produce now an organic food that is affordable for everybody.
And we can see this as far as the larger size. The stalk size, you're saying sometimes it's the same as, or it could be larger, but the juices are higher, so it's actually giving you more results.
Correct.
And more product that then can be processed, as we're talking about this ancient cane panella, which is one of the groups that have come to you and want to actually incorporate your Terra HyOx in that. Looking at these limes, tell us about this.
So these limes were, it's a type of lime called Tahitian lime. So it's a variety. And these were trees in an orchard that were very receding because they were aged. Once they were treated with good water, oxygenated water, good symbiotic probiotics, these plants came back, like gained a second life. And probably due to experience, I would say, the plant was able to produce these larger limes, larger fruit that were juicier, tastier, and have a flavor that was much, much better than the fruit that
The
they
inner
used to have
essence.
before. So the inner expression of the plant was coming through.
That's absolutely fantastic. Looking at coffee, and we're going to go out in a couple of these because we're about the end of this. Coffee treated, but you can actually raise the value of that coffee just by soaking it in your water, correct?
Correct. So what we allow is the coffee to be left in the water or in the plant and ripening slower. So again, these expressions are much better. So the coffee farmers are very happy because their coffee now is of better quality, better taste, and they are getting a better price for that coffee.
Well, we're going to go out. Actually, I'm going to put up this. This is one of your fruit there. But thank you for being with us on the EmeraldPlanet TV. Dr. Linares, he's the lead scientist, founder, and CEO of HyOx SuperWater. Fantastic for sharing with us. Thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.